This is the DRF Players Podcast. Here are your hosts, Peter Thomas Fornatel and Jonathan Kinchin.
Up of the stretch, and Baltoro moves up alongside of McKinsey, and they're racing tightly. They were brushing in up a stretch. McKinsey fights back underneath Baltoro. The San Felipe living up to its billing. A 16th left to go. McKinsey on the inside, and Baltoro in a spine-tingling spectacle at the Great Race Place. Baltoro, McKinsey, they hit the line. McKinsey beats Baltoro in a photo, 6 clear of Kantaka Peace, and then Ayakara 5th.
Hello and welcome to the DRF Players Podcast. This is show 317, the Tuesday, March 13th edition. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatal, back with you in the Brooklyn bunker. And that was the call of the Grade 2 San Felipe, which I was out at the Great Race Place Santa Anita to watch. I was joined then, as I am now, by a man calling in from Planet, Texas. When I gave him his new nickname, I didn't expect him to earn it again so quickly in the Ultimate Betting Challenge. He is the Baron of Breakage, the People's Champion, Jonathan Kinchin. JK, what's up?
The People's 8th place champion is what you meant to say. Yeah.
We'll talk about the UBC among our list of topics today. We'll also chat a little Cheltenham Festival maybe a little bit later on. We want to go through all the stakes action from the weekend, but I think we have to start with the topic that has been all over the Twitter sphere, and it is the San Felipe controversial DQ. I'll just say, I've told the story on the show before about how I punched the wall after La La Land got taken down from Best Picture. Not that I was so upset, except for the bet that I'd had on La La Land, and Moonlight got put up. Didn't want people to get some other idea of why I was upset. It was only about the money, and it was about more than the money on Saturday for me when I was seething. I did not punch a wall because there were other people around. Had I been in the bunker, I think the wall would have suffered. I had to take a walk around for half an hour and not like talk to another human and just walk around in the rain and decompress because I was just not ready to talk to the other humans after those 11 minutes of torture when it became slowly obvious and then quickly obvious what was going to happen in that result. We'll start with your thoughts, JK. We're going to have a thorough discussion of this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, from an operational standpoint, I find it to be absolutely absurd that it took so long to make the decision, especially when the decision was a unanimous one. So it's like, if it was unanimous, then why did it take 11? I heard 17. Let's just say it's somewhere in the middle. It took entirely too long. And so, from an operational standpoint, we have to do a better job, and I think, in the inquiry space. I don't think it's on the top of the list of things that need to be fixed in racing by any means. However, I just think it's something that we can improve upon, something that we can try to do a little bit better. Because it seems to be a frustration from an operational standpoint as well as a decision-making standpoint way too often.
Okay, that's absolutely valid point. In the wake of the call, people are entitled to be very upset. Bob Baffert said some things that were borderline silly, more or less threatening to take his ball and go home, i.e. briefly talking about the idea of not running McKinsey back as punishment or Santa Anita. We're not going to hold that against him because it's heat of the moment and it was gut-wrenching and difficult. And, I too said some things that were not correct. I think I called it the worst DQ I'd ever seen, maybe even more than once in the aftermath of it. I don't think that's fair. So I can relate to maybe saying some things sharply, a little too sharply critical. But there's no denying that it was even if it was a decision that could be justified, it's not wasn't a popular decision. It wasn't an easy decision. I still don't think it was the right decision either. Talk brass tacks. Should the horse have come down?
Yeah, I mean, in full disclosure, I think it's important when you have these conversations to let people know if you were or were not financially involved. I was financially involved. I was negatively affected by the decision. I had singled McKinsey, obviously, talking about him on the show, in various pools. The problem I have with it is this. if you just look from the 16th pole to the wire, I do not have a problem. I don't have a major problem with McKinsey coming down. It was a little bit race riding, and I think that, that should probably be taken into account. But so, I think it was still kind of dicey, but I get it if they disqualified him based on what happened from the 16th pole to the wire. With that said, I think that it's the problem that I have with it is that you cannot ignore what happened at the quarter pole when Bolt Doro race rode him and pinned him down on the rail and did the hind end bump to him twice. I just don't think you can say, oh, well, that what happened in the stretch affected, at the quarter, the 16th pole affected the outcome of the race, but what happened at the quarter pole didn't. That's the problem I have with it.
Yeah, I agree. I would argue that the incident at the quarter pole was actually a bigger deal. He leans on the horse to me, it was clear whose fault that was, and it was the fault of Bolt Doro. I thought he was, like you said, trying to keep him pinned in, sort of aggressively leaning on him to the point of contact. I didn't think McKinsey was getting out there as much as Bolt Doro was coming in. I watched it 17 times. I haven't watched it since. Is that an accurate statement I just made?
Yeah, I think it was clearly Bolt Doro coming, race riding, tightening him up, which is fine. I just wish they would have left it. It was such an unbelievable race, as you just heard with that call. What an unbelievable finish. And, it lived up to the hype between those two horses. Praise Bolt Doro for running as well as he did. I think he ran better than we both expected that he would based on the direction it felt as if he was going. But at the same time, I just wish they would have just let him run and let it be. A lot about it was wrong to me, but, it is what it is. Turn the page.
The lack of uniformity in rules and the way that the decisions are made right now definitely comes into effect. Like the fact that you can have people who are so convinced they're right on both sides of this equation. And I, like you, JK, can't be fully objective. That turned a winning day into a losing day for me. It meant a lot. It meant a lot to me. So I am not objective here. And like I said, I get the point, as you in a very measured way said, the horse definitely comes out 2 paths deep in the lane. Had that not happened, it's debatable. You can make the case that Bolt Doro would have won. I don't think it's a certainty, but it's probably more than 50-50 had the horses both kept straight paths. But, I was more of the mind that there was another foul at the top of the stretch. Then they had the entire stretch to decide the race. They decided the race, and the stewards decided to interfere. I don't like that, and I don't like that the rules aren't clear, and there's weird wording in the rules. You can make sort of a semantic argument that, the incident at the top of the stretch clearly didn't cost Bolt Doro McKinsey a placing because he did finish first. But the other incident deeper in stretch maybe did cost Bolt Doro. So therefore, you can see how stewards' minds might churn over this. Now, they say they just thought it was inconclusive who was at fault at the top of the stretch, but that's a little puzzling to me. So I know you wanted to turn the page, but I'm going to make you talk about it just a little bit more.
No, you're fine. No, what's funny is yesterday hanging out in the suite, I know you had hopped on a plane. I got to hang out with Duke and Chick and Marv, which will also tell some fun stories about Marv. But Duke made a good point that he felt like I think this is an interesting food for thought So he thought that if Bolt Doro would have won, he would have got disqualified.
Is it based on that way that rule is worded? Because that what he was saying? Because that was a thought that occurred to me too.
He felt like either way the winner was getting DQ'd because of I guess he didn't specifically say because of the rule, but I would assume that that's what you meant. Did it cost you a placing?
Right.
So I
don't think that's the right way these things should be adjudicated. I think it needs to be looked to in a perfect world that we're very far away from. It would be dealt with, with a national office and swiftly. But I try not to let that disappoint from the fact that it was a great horse race and it was super exciting, and that's what we want to see. And it was really to that point, the first moment I felt like along this trail to the Triple Crown that we had the kind of stretch run, the kind of finish we want to see, and the clock backed it up to a certain degree. I mean, 101 Beyer speed figure is what I'm trying to say for the race. That is, what you expect to be seeing from your true Derby contenders at this time of year. I haven't actually, believe it or not, taken a look at what Craig gave the race, though I'm sure that figure is available. Yes, a 124 raw, 123 adjusted for Bolt Doro. McKinsey gets the benefit of that extra point, 124 as he was closer to the pace in the early part of the running. Race wasn't coded by Craig. It looks like a serious horse race and a terrific prep race for the Kentucky Derby. Hopefully everybody stays together and we get to do it again in a few weeks' time for the Santa Anita Derby. We talked a little bit about Bolt Doro. I wasn't sure if he was still a racehorse. He's still a racehorse. How much credence do you put in the fact of Mick Ruiz saying this was 80% of Bolt Doro? Can you take that? How close to face value are you taking that comment?
I mean, he said it before, right, in the Del Mar Futurity, and then we saw what happened in the front runner after that.
Great point.
And I'm not talking about the restaurant. And then, I still feel like it's going to catch up to him. The setbacks that he had when, he's got to come back and run at a mile and an eighth, and then he's got to come back and run at a mile and a quarter. I think I'll still take a position against. But now the market will be a little bit more favorable in that regard because he is back.
I wonder, though, we saw the dynamic with the unbelievable race in the front runner, then followed by, he made a very similar statement about 80% after the Del Mar Futurity. Unreal performance in the front runner, not up to his own standards. The slow break obviously costing him in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. Are we now set up to see that pattern again with a massive run in the Santa Anita Derby and then maybe the first Saturday in May is the time to get off? Or are you suggesting that you are going to be opposed to him even in the Santa Anita Derby?
Yeah, I think the value will be there depending on who shows up for the Santa Anita Derby. That picture obviously has gotten a little bit more interesting with the threat of McKinsey leaving and some other horses possibly showing up for that one. So
we'll get there.
Yeah, I think I would probably just continue to be opposed unless he just starts working like a madman again. Then obviously that would kind of get the enthusiasm rolling again in that direction.
So the jury is out, but generally inclined to be opposed. Now, McKinsey's a really interesting horse. Now, this is the horse that I was saying from the previous races I was interested to maybe take a shot at when the time was right. I decided that time was not on Saturday. Thought he looked amazing. Just everything about the way that spot figured. And with my suspicions about Bolt Doro, I thought even money was actually a good bet on him in that spot. And I'll say this, he is a fighter. You said it when we were watching the race live in Logan. You thought that when the bump at the quarter pole happened, a lot of horses aren't going to respond to that. A lot of horses are going to be intimidated when that happens to them and run worse. Somehow, JK, you intuited that he was going to run better from that point in the race. Why did you think that?
I have no idea. And I said it after the race. You
said it out loud, didn't you? I mean, I didn't make that up.
No, I did. I was just, for whatever reason, when that bump happened, the first thing that came out of my mouth is, McKinsey, I think that's good. McKinsey's going to respond to that. And I could have just been saying it because I was hoping that was what was going to happen, but it happened to work out.
Did you think, had he been, was there something about his trip up to that point that you felt?
No, I just knew he was down inside, and sometimes horses can get a little bit, shy down in there. And I felt like if they're prey animals, right? I feel like him getting bumped a little bit might have kind kind of woke up that spirit, and he would have found a little bit, and he did. Obviously, he was the pre-disqualification winner of the race.
He found tremendously. Your best guess? They keep straight lines in the stretch. Who wins?
I don't think Boldoro was really going to pass him. I just didn't ever feel like that. He didn't pass him in the gallop out either, if I recall. So I'm not sure if he was going to get by him.
And me neither. There was enough doubt. I think I said more than 50-50 before. That might have been charitable, but I do get it. I do get it when you come out a couple of paths. It does create the other horse having to run a little bit farther. I don't know I don't know exactly what the rule should be. It'd be a fun challenge as a writer to sit down and decide what we thought would be fair. But I do know that when it comes to herding, they are stricter. The rule book, I do believe, is stricter in California than in New York. In New York, does that stay up in New York?
Oh, yeah, no question. Yeah, it stays up, and Andy Serling is hot on Twitter.
Andy had a very measured tweet about it. I thought, trying to look forward and talk about what a great race it was. But that's not good. It's not good to be able to have that question get answered like that you and I both agree that it's a DQ in one place and it's not a DQ in another. It would be so nice. We joke around sometimes about various jurisdictions playing nice with one another. How incredibly hard would it be to play nice enough to come up with uniform rules? I don't even know the mechanics of how it would happen or who could lead the way on it, but I certainly think it's something that not only horse players, but the larger sport could benefit from, because it's just so frustrating. It's such a difficult thing for both connections and players when it is the way that it's currently constituted. Lots of 3-year-old action to talk about, not just at Santa Anita. So I'll ask you this way, JK, of all the 3-year-old performances over the weekend, which one impressed you the most?
Yeah, I think it's probably appropriate since we've been listening to calls. Let's check out another call right here, and then we'll talk about that in a second.
Past the quarter pole comes Justify. By 3 lengths, Calix Man is second on the inside of Shiver Me Timbers. They swing for home, and it's Justify by 4. Shiver Me Timbers second. Calix Man on the inside is next. Justify, coming past the 8th pole, would have to race in outer space to feel less pressure. He's not yet battle-hardened, but just who is the most talented 3-year-old to race this weekend? Justify, a colt of limitless potential, wins by 6 lengths from Shiver Me Timbers, and it's either Pepe Tonio or Calix Man for third.
There you have it. Justify, the big winner on Sunday of the 3-year-olds at Santa Anita. What do you stop the clock with that effort, JK? I haven't really done much deconstruction of the race yet. As you said, I was on a plane.
Yeah, 101 buyer. So very similar to what the stakes horses ran the day before. Did it obviously super impressively. Was geared down. It felt like the horse could have went another second or two faster. Impressive, really impressive. Fun to watch. Something kind of special feeling about him. We'll see what happens. It's actually I don't know if it was Duke or Paul that made the point that it's actually a shame that we're not going to see Solomini, Bolt Doro, McKinsey, and Justify all load in the same gate for the Santa Anita Derby. It doesn't seem like that's likely to happen. But I think this one's pretty good, Pete.
I like it. No figure from Craig yet, but didn't he run his eyes out on Craig's scale, the Time Form US scale, in the first race? Didn't he? I want to say the number I want to say sounds so high, I'm not even sure if it's right. Was it like a 130, 131?
I think he ran a 132. However, your guy Craig is he might not have posted it on the site yet, but he did let us know via Twitter that Justify will get about a 125 Time Form US figure for his allowance today.
What did you think about the way he broke? I'm going to pick a nit here. What the way he broke?
Well, it was a second start, right? I'm sure he's just still sorting the gate out. And Mike in a post race interview said that he was a little a little second race jitters, kind of a little nervous in the post parade. So, I think he's still learning. I think he's still learning a lot. And so Never too concerned, especially with Baffert horses. Since when can he not get a horse to break from the gate? I think that he'll get whatever situations are going on there resolved quickly.
Right. I mean, that's amazing because obviously, that the same half step slow that doesn't matter in a whatever runner allowance race at Santa Anita is a sentence for an absolute horror trip on the first Saturday in May, obviously, which is why I bring that up. Of course, with another race between now and then, as you point, and in the incredibly capable hands of JK's close personal friend Bob Baffert, there's plenty of time to get that sorted out, I would think. But it is something to keep an eye on.
I will say this real quick, Pete.
Please.
I think it's important to think about the connections and the jockey were thinking when they got him a gate. They've got a horse who's stretching out. They've got a horse who's making a second start and a horse who's without a doubt the most talented horse in that field. What's the point of popping him away from there, lighting him up? He doesn't settle. He doesn't learn anything, and he just blitzes around there. When you know 100%. You've got the best horse, and if he breaks 2 or 3 steps slow, he's gonna chew on some dirt, which will be a great experience, and then he's gonna come running and win anyways. So it feels as if if Paco is leaning forward and ready to go when they break, it felt like Mike was sitting back a little bit and let the horse kind of go on his own.
That was a great point. Absolutely. Did you notice the gallop out from up there in the suites where you were watching?
I did. Yeah, it wasn't like. It wasn't one of those deals where he was extending, but no one was passing him. And he, it's weird because when you start to gear a horse down at the 8th pole and the other ones are running all the way through the wire, he's got an 1/8 of a mile of slowing down that they didn't have,
yeah.
So he's already gone significantly slower. They kind of came to him a little bit, but then he opened back up. I think it's hard to look at a gallop out like that when a horse was not really asked in the stretch.
Also an excellent point. Just curious to get as much info as we can from your firsthand look. Should we talk about some of the? I mean, I do want to talk a little bit more about Santa Anita, but I think while we're on the 3-year-old train, we should continue to do that. Why don't we go to Tampa Bay? Or do you have something else?
Yeah, I just had a quick. So what do you think? Do you think he's like the real deal?
Oh, this horse justifies?
Yeah.
Looks unreal to me. I mean, and I think he could be, in a funny way, he could be value, but simply because of the Apollo narrative, which I do not believe in.
No.
You can make a compelling case on the Apollo narrative. You can look and you can see horses. It's not just. I was sort of, when looking at it critically at first, and for those who don't know, Curse of Apollo, the last Derby winner. Who to win the race after not racing as a 2-year-old was Apollo in whatever year, and that very long time ago, and no runner has run since. And it's not like they're a bunch of no hopers. There are plenty of horses who you would have expected would run better that did not. But I don't think there's much signal in that. I think the way the game, and the reason I say that is. The way that the game has evolved since, I feel like that's one of those stats that's really good about pointing out something that was true as opposed to something that is going to be true. What are your Apollo thoughts?
Yeah, no, I'm not an Apollo. I think a lot of records are circumstantial. It's kind of in the same category as like some of the kind of kooky trainer stats people come up with, and they're just very circumstantial. And so it's like I want my facts or my stats that lead me to making decisions to be things that are large sample sizes and take into account all of the circumstances, right? And it's like it's not because the horse doesn't have the foundation. It's more about the horse, right? And it's more about the way the horses are trained and how they've been trained and whatever. If a horse doesn't run until he's 3, he's typically got issues, right? So it's not so much that it's just a horse that has issues. And I don't think that if you start on December 31st, you're any more likely to win the Kentucky Derby.
What is I haven't read that much of the Justify narrative. What is the stated reason he didn't run at 3?
I have not heard. I haven't heard. I haven't heard what it was. Let me text Bob real quick. Hold on.
I'm sure he'll appreciate that.
I don't have Bob's number.
We have obviously incredible. I'm surprised you don't have his number by now. You chat with him every time you see him. It's really something to see, folks. The obviously going to be so much great reporting. Jake Prippin covers the Triple Crown for DRF, and we'll be writing about all this stuff in great detail, and we'll be reading every word with interest as we continue to talk about it here on the show. But yeah, I think that that narrative is going to get so much play that I think even if Justify continues to impress, that it might give you a little bit of juice. And I think that the potential for that narrative to be overbet is greater than the potential that there's any real signal in that narrative. That's the way that I look at life when it comes to Justify. Let's keep talking about these 3-year-olds. Why don't we move down to Quip at Tampa Bay, earns a 94 buyer speed figure for his efforts. What'd you think about the Tampa Bay Derby?
Yeah, I mean, I thought he was good. Same silks as Justify, China Horse Club, and Windstar. I think you know this, but the trainer Rudy Brissett is very friendly with the Prince of Keeneland because of his relationship with Bill Mott. Rudy was a former assistant for Bill Mott, and so I was happy for him, and had a dinner with him before, and so I was happy that he got it done. But like we always joke, I don't see myself cutting in line to wager on that horse moving forward. I mean, it was good for him.
Good trip, right? It was a coated blue race on Timeform US. Quip was up near the top. Did you see any horses you are eager to bet back out of the race, if not for the Kentucky Derby, for the next prep, or just horses you're particularly interested in going forward?
No, I mean, I'd be interested in World of Trouble, the horse that the service horse, if he were to start traveling at distances that are a little bit shorter and happen to be around one turn. But no, that race is always weird for me. Our friend who has a lot of crazy sayings, Aaron Veracruz, he was carrying on the other night at dinner about what happens at Tampa stays at what happens at Tampa stays at Tampa. It's if you don't run well there, then you can excuse it. If you do run well there, you can excuse it. It's just a tricky situation. So I'm just that whole situation was always rough for me to try to evaluate.
Untamed Domain back on the turf, but I mean, everybody will see that. Hard. It's not like the form is going to be too darkened, I don't think, by the logical attempt at trying the dirt if you have a 3-year-old as good as Untamed Domain. But that's the only one that pops in my mind thinking of horses who might be of interest next time out. I assume you wouldn't hold that experiment against him, and I'm guessing you think he'll be on the green the next time.
Yeah, I would imagine so. I'd imagine they'll find a way to get him back on that, probably at Keeneland or something.
Now, before we talk about the winner of the Gotham, a few years ago on this show, I'm going to give out a bingo square here, JK. A few years ago on the show, there was a lot of talk of your belief, which I still am amazed that you went through his entire career believing this, because I think his PPs told a very different story. But you were very much of the belief that Exaggerator was a 1-turn horse. Are we ready to declare that Free Drop Billy is a 2-turn horse after watching the Gotham?
Yeah, I think absolutely. He's one that's going to be fun moving forward. He's one that I've talked about. There's a couple of guys that always get my attention for whatever reason. I feel like they do really well at 1.25 miles, and Dale Romans is one of them. And I would think that Free Drop Billy would be really primed to run well with the right kind of setup on Derby Day. He's one of those horses that just feels like he's got to run in the Super. So he's definitely one that I'll keep an eye on. The Timeform figure wasn't really very swift for the Gotham, especially for Free Drop Billy, but he's definitely one that I'd keep an eye on.
I felt like he had all manner of excuses to not worry as much about the clock in terms of the flow of that race, a little bit the track maybe, and just also getting bumped out of the gate and just looking uncomfortable, going as short as that in some ways. I know he'd run successfully at similar distances in the past, but just seems like a horse who's going to be suited by conditions different than the ones that he saw on Gotham Day. Were you paying enough attention in New York to have an opinion about the track?
No, I wasn't. I watched just the 2 stakes races. We were. It's always tough, man, when you're at Santa Anita. It's like the rest of the world is like way ahead of you. You feel like it's early, and then you like, look up and there's a stake running, but you feel like it's 10 a.m. It's just really confusing. So I luckily popped over to watch the 2 stakes, but no,
Gotcha.
but I do think it's fair that I point out that the horse that I liked finished last. I think there should be I feel like if you pick a horse that finishes last on the show, like there should be like a swear jar of sorts, put a buck in every time you pick a horse that's last.
That's
And at the end of the year,
bad.
we'll donate it to old friends or something.
I like that idea, actually. We'll have to start tracking. Dial operator, the horse you're talking about. Hopefully folks listen to my opinion on that one regarding the closing sprinters stretching out. You predicted the first part of the trip. He did get the position going forward, but I just thought it was a no-finish situation, which I think was sort of based on how difficult that trick is to pull. Not a horse I'd necessarily get off for life, but I did think overbet at 7-1. I think it was that Kinchin money.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, jeepers.
Let's talk about Entice, the winner, who was impressive, gives some real credence to the idea that the rail was not good at Gulfstream on February 3rd, his previous race. That was a theory I'd heard mooted. I went back and did some chart work myself and I wasn't convinced. But I'm going to go back and do some more chart work and take a look at that one, because it did seem like that race was too bad to be believed. If, in fact, Enticed had a bias excuse there, that makes his performance a little bit easier to understand and comprehend. Do you ever do that kind of work when it comes to bias and you see results that surprise you and try to use it for explanation? I don't think you want to do that. I don't think you want to go crazy doing that. There are plenty of times where a bad race can be just a bad race, but then there's other times where that's just another way that bias can help you understand what's going on the racetrack or what has gone on the racetrack in previous weeks.
Yeah, I think it's always important to look back, especially when it comes to bias stuff, because things on the day can make you think something about a track, but then we've talked about it before, you can prove or discredit those thoughts after horses start running back. So I think that, because then you can see what they did out of the performance that they had previously. So I think it's very important to go back and kind of reevaluate. I think it's kind of dangerous to declare something some way, and then when the evidence is leaning in a different direction, to not change your stance on it.
And you definitely don't want to use bias as just a catch-all excuse anytime you're wrong about a horse either. But like I said, this is a situation where I'd heard others talk about that as a possible people I respect as a possible day when the rail wasn't good. And then you see a result like that. It is smart just to stay flexible. You can put a note in Formulator. Hey, this was the day there was, some disagreement about it. Wouldn't write all those words, but possible dead rail or whatever it is you want to put in there. And it can just help you look at those horses going forward in a way that might make more sense. What did you think of Enticed overall? Is this a serious player?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not convinced that he's going to necessarily excel on the first Saturday in May, and I want to get interested in him. But he is the type of horse that for Kieran that's going to stick around, and he's going to win some good races. He's going to win some grade 2s and some grade 3s, and he's going to be right there in a couple of grade 1s just if he stays in training throughout his career. He's a nice, young, talented horse for Godolphin. I'm sure he's got some races with his name on him. I just am not excited about him on the Triple Crown Trail.
I wrote that Derby countdown, the super look for the Derby countdown guide. And while I didn't do very well picking the winner, I thought it was going to be Free Drop Billy, I did say nice things about Old Time Revival, who ended up running a very nice race at 35-1. And reading the Naira notes, JK, I think that there's an outside chance maybe I got a little bit of an assist where it came to the winner of the Gotham Challenge at Aqueduct. Did you read this?
Oh, no, I didn't see that.
You don't know what I'm talking about?
No,
here's the story. Karen Casey, a registered nurse from Manhattan, successfully hit a $10 try in the race at Gotham to vault to the top of the standings. And here's the line I'll just quote from this press release, which maybe Naja wrote, I don't know. But there's no byline on it. But it says, Casey said she's been following handicappers on Twitter and listening to podcasts, especially Pete Fornatal, and learned that successful players have been winning similar events by playing trifectas. So there, I get the shout out. The show gets the shout out. Not a word about you.
Geez, you're like a celebrity.
I'm in the Naira notes, man. That's how you know you've made it. But
you are a celebrity.
So I'm going to
recognize you were getting more attention than Lafitte Pinkai at the Derby the other night. I mean,
I don't know about that. That was like it was like having the president of the United States in the bar at the Derby. All the attention Lafitte was getting was great to get a chance to see him. He looked fantastic. He's got such a great energy about him, and I had a great conversation with him. I asked him, "Oh, Lafitte, how many big caps is this for you?" The question was on my mind because we'd been hanging out with our buddy James Leal, who had been to 42. That was James's 42nd big cap in a row, which I thought was amazing. So I popped that question to Lafitte, and he said, "I don't know how many I've been to, but I know I won 5, and it should have been 6, but they took me down." Seemed like a very appropriate sentiment for the end of the day on Saturday.
Absolutely. I wonder if those 42 races that James has been to, if any of them had a winner that gets you less excited.
Well, it's hard. You know, the race is in such a difficult spot on the calendar. And Jay Hovde wrote a great piece in the Forum last week talking to Hammer about sort of the attendant problems when you have these monster races around it. And Hammer intimated the fact that they might want to be taking a look at, things, what can be done to maybe try to restore some of the race's grandeur. Of course, not helping the situation at all was the fact of the weather. And by the time that race came along, it was just everything was a mess. Opportunity scratches because he doesn't want to run in it. Nobody could blame Baffert or Opportunity for making that decision based on what the track looked like. But I suppose we should give the winner some props anyway.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've always, like I said on the show last week, he's a horse that I don't necessarily like but he runs well sometimes. And I felt like there was a possibility that he was going to run well there. He's always forwardly placed. He's shown he's a grade 1 winner, and so he or a multiple grade 1 winner. So I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it. He's not one that just gets the blood flowing. He's got no shot of getting tattooed on my arm is essentially what I'm trying to say.
Accelerate, of course, is the horse we're talking about for John Sadler. Cruised through fractions coated blue to a 135 final raw on time for him, adjusted to a 133 rating. And I'll find the buyer here somewhere. 110 on the buyer speed figure scale, very much in line. But it also gets back to the idea, JK, that I almost feel like racing in 2018. Like, I get having a race like this as a grade 1. In a sense, I get it. But like, if that's a grade 1, we at the very least need something called a grade 1 plus. That's the races that the best horses like actually circle on the calendar and target. Fair?
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, it's just tough because it depends on what happens year to year. If you look back at the winners of that race in recent years, there's still some quality in there. You got some shared belief. You've got some game on dude. You got a lot of winners of the race who deserve that grade 1 recognition. But like you said, they're in a tough spot. And so I don't know what the answer is. I was actually thinking about it. And I don't know, maybe we brainstormed together. I don't remember who it was about when they could actually move the race. Like when could the race be more successful? And one of the days I heard that I was interested in would be like opening day, December 26th. You're far enough away from the Breeders' Cup. And in my opinion, you could act it's a tight window, but you could act as a prep for the Pegasus.
Yeah. No, that's not nuts. It's not that tight. What is it, 4 weeks?
Yeah, 4 weeks-ish.
Are you doing math and failing? What's going on over there? You're not answering my questions over here. But that is an interesting idea. There are even though there were a bunch of ideas mooted a while back about how to change the Breeders' Cup. And it seems like the one, obviously, and I'm as guilty as anybody of anti-marketing with, going off at great length here and on Twitter about the not being a huge fan of the concept of the Breeders' Cup Derby. But like, let's just say theoretically you were to try to find a day where racing could own national TV with a handful of dirt races in December and have that be like the main focus of the Breeders' Cup, to run a Santa Anita Handicap almost as like a prep race on the other day. I still don't, even as I'm just brainstorming about it now, it doesn't sound right to me. Again, my biggest feeling on that is the Breeders' Cup is one of these things in racing that really works. So I don't know that I'd want to mess with it. But something radical is going to need to be done, I think, if you want this race to get back up where it was. Of those two ideas, I certainly think that you're the one you mentioned, JK, about an opening day situation. I mean, that could, I don't know, that just going by feel, like, that doesn't feel icky. That feels like it could work to me.
What a cool card too. You'd have the Malibu, you'd have the Malibu there, you'd have the La Brea, I believe the Mathis Brothers Mile. And then there's a down the hill stake, I believe. And then you have the big cap. I think that would be great. And the other good thing about the day after Christmas is typically you're not the only show, but you're the only big show. So that's good in terms of the eyes and the handle. All the dollars will be wagering on your card. You won't be competing very much. I think it's a good idea. So maybe we'll text Hammer, and if he has, I'm sure he's already thought of it.
Yes, I think that guy's about 16 steps of where we are when it comes to this stuff. But it'll be interesting to see what happens. Quickly, we should at least talk about the other stakes. The story of the Kilrow. Well, I guess it's two stories. It's Bowie's Hero running a big race and getting the job done. It's also world approval. I don't know, bad day, JK, or a horse who's had enough?
I don't know if it's enough or just maybe just needs a little bit of time. But they gave him some time before Tampa, and then shows up back here, and I don't know. He wasn't very good, and I didn't see much of an excuse. He didn't pop away from there great, but he just didn't really have too much of an excuse.
Some interesting horses, though. I mean, Bowie's Hero ran really well. That 6 furlong fraction was coded red by Craig. Ended up with 126 on the Timeform US scale. And I feel like made the move into that fast part of the race, which I always like to see as a sign of a horse who is maybe going to continue to go forward. How much do you like him?
I've always kind of been a fan of that horse. I've always thought he was pretty good. I mean, on the show I said, obviously I was bullish on world approval and how tough he was going to be. But I mentioned, I guess, if there was anyone else I'd get interested in, it would be him. Channel Marker ran really well too and looked like a winner when they turned for home, and he had the worst trip. So, I think he's good. I think he'll I think he'll be fine in California racing against those types of horses. I don't see him showing up for the Shadwell Turf Mile and like winning or the Makers 46 or whatever. When he has to face the Chads and the Motts and the Todds of the world and the Clements or whatever, when they're on the East Coast, I don't think he's going to show up to Saratoga and win the 4-star Dave. I think he's a nice horse. He's going to win a lot of grass races in California. But he did get a really good trip too. I mean, he saved every step of ground, and it opened up right there on the inside while Channel Marker was 6 wide. So. I think that trip, if I was doing a trip note for that race, I'd put perfect trip or great trip.
It wasn't. I don't disagree about the trip, but I wouldn't discount. It's not a perfect trip that I'm in a hurry to downgrade just because of how I think the internal fractions and the internal figures are going to come back for the horse in terms of like the fast part of the race and when he made his move. Channel Maker's an interesting one. He did run very well. They did go fast enough to bring his stamina into play. Do you think this is one who is, the great thing when they're with Mott, to me, I'm just, wherever he puts him next, I'm just going to trust that that's the right place. But if it was up to you, is this a horse you think his future is at a mile, or do you think his future is going longer?
I think he seems kind of versatile in that regard. I think it's, Mott and Chad and those guys have learned, I think, to, if they have one who's just kind of on the fringe of being good on the East Coast, you ship them to the West Coast, and they've got a much better shot when it comes to the grass. So we'll see what he does moving forward. He feels like a second, third, fourth type all the time on the East Coast. And, you know, not just so much because of his style, but also because of where his ability and his ceiling might be.
Rematch even at a mile, you're on Channel Maker?
Just it's a pace situation. I think Bowie's more tactical, so not to dodge the question, but the pace would make the difference in where I would go in those two spots.
Gotcha.
You know, some stretch out sprinters and stuff like that coming over, and it looks like it's going to really cook up speed inside, outside, you know, that type of deal. I could see Channel Marker, but
I think it's Maker. You keep saying Marker,
sorry.
isn't it? Maker?
I keep saying Marker. Yeah, my fault.
I tried to subtly correct you, but now I just have to come on out and tell you to put a coin in the mistake jar.
That's fair. That's fair.
On the buyer scale, Bowie's Hero comes back with a 103, and we're not going to let our analysis of the day's racing at Santa Anita go by without talking about the triple bend and the excellent training job to get City of Light into the winner's circle, and with a quick time at that, 106 buyer speed figure. I'll fumble here and find the time for him in a minute.
Yeah, no, he was impressive. He you know, I think Frank Scattoni, we were sitting there, he said, he looked at me right before the race and said, I'm not sure even money on this horse isn't value. And he ran really well. I mean, he you know, and Frank actually educated me about something in that race that I want to share, is that we were sitting in the Logan. So that's, you know, it's obviously right where they come out, where they warm up. And he pointed out that the 6 Captain Scotty got away from the pony soon, and it just kind of showed him that the horse either is just kind of rickety and needs to be warmed up, and so that wasn't like an ideal sign. And it also showed that they were going to kind of be very aggressive and sending him from the gate, and was going to give City of Light something to kind of sit off of and not be the target. And that's what happened. He ran well.
Though funny enough, it was Bobby Abu Dhabi who made the lead and ran.
Oh, Bobby, sorry, yeah, that's what I meant.
Oh! You were talking about Bobby Abu Dhabi, not Captain Scotty.
Yeah. Well, no, Bobby Abu Dhabi. No, Captain Scotty's who he warmed up, and that was the horse that I was worried about. But I think I said that wrong, where he actually sat off of Bobby, not off of Captain Scotty.
Correct. That's exactly right. But it is interesting. Frank's great with those type of observations. You can follow him on Twitter. I believe is he at Scattoni Sure Shot?
I believe that is the case.
And he was one of the 8 horse players, including our buddy James, who we mentioned before, including Leo, including our winner, who sat down for a dry run of the World Horseplayer Tour Santa Anita Preakness final table format that we did in the suites on Friday at Santa Anita. What did you feel like you learned? We barely deconstructed since it happened, JK. What did you feel like we learned coming out of that? And give our winner some props.
Yeah, no, I think it was fun. It was fun. It was exciting. There was a lot of changes. This is the second time we've done a practice round where the person who randomly started with the highest bankroll, we wanted to simulate it as close to the actual event as possible. The person who started with the highest bankroll ended with not with 0, but ended. Actually, with 0. Yeah,
he zeroed out.
Ended with 0.
Leo zeroed out on the last race.
Right. So I think that's interesting and dynamic enough. And then, you know, we hadn't spoke yet, but last night at dinner, I had dinner with a great group, actually. Duke, Paul, Paul's son, Marv, the Man in Black.
Nice.
Keith
he made
Smith.
An appearance. I heard he left Vegas with this hat in his hand, and I wasn't sure if he was going to turn up, but good to know he answered the bell.
The Man in Black was there, and then Travis Stone and Nick Tamaro. So we had a fun dinner. But one of the cool things that happened that I was very appreciative of was Duke and Paul really tried to, not in a negative way, but in a helpful way, were asking questions to see if they could poke holes in kind of the new situation, and they couldn't. And they were very excited about the idea. They were a little bit fired up because, and I don't know if you know this yet, but it frustrated Paul about how kind of these live money tournaments, they turn into just like a last race thing, and it's tough, and it's part of it. And we're excited that our situation, I don't think, is going to be like that. The World Horseplayer Tour, I think, will be a little bit different. It's going to change the dynamic of that, the importance of that last race and what guys will do. But yesterday, going into the last race of the UBC, the top 3 guys, first, second, and third, all hit the last race and still finished 4th, 5th, and 6th.
Yeah, it's too much of a disadvantage in a way to be in the lead, right? Because you're going to have people firing from behind you. I mean, I'm assuming that's where their comments were going. It's just, obviously, the last race is always going to be important. Just like, you know, the last 2 minutes in a sporting event is going to always be the most important in a lot of ways. But you don't want to make it so that the last 2 minutes takes away the work of the first, 58. And it's hard to do. One thing that the World Horseplayer Tour format does, by having a cut line, I think is great. You know what I mean? You have to have gotten up into that final 8 to be participating. And while we haven't seen it in any of our dry runs, there's a very real chance you could blow that open with a bet early, as opposed to having it always come down to the last race. At least I hope so. The Friday run through, Chris Addo, who ended up winning, and I'm not sure if that's how Chris pronounces his last name, I'm embarrassed to say, but that's what I'm going with. And he actually won with a bet before the race even started, because he brilliant game theory, ended up blocking his closest pursuers, so that even had the horse that the Leo and James picked won, Chris would have had more on it and gotten the job done. So it's not an easy answer. It's not an easy answer to how to format this, but that what you just described to me is a flaw in the traditional live bankroll format, and obviously this isn't a one-time thing. This is semi-typical, I'd say, when it comes to traditional live bank play. Yes?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the funny thing about it is I was, 4th going into the last race, and I didn't hit. And and Paul had pointed out that I was the only player. I was the highest player that didn't hit the last race. So everyone in front of me hit the last race, all 7
That's
of them.
pretty funny. That's pretty funny. What was your strategy going in? It looked like you had 11,000 and you decided to bet 1,000?
No, I had like 11,300.
Okay.
And I didn't want to put myself out of if the guy that was in 5th missed, I didn't want to put myself out of that position. So I just played like $800. I was debating whether or not I was going to, in a other situation, I would have probably bet the whole 11 to try to win. But I didn't have a strong enough opinion to bet on something where I could bet, 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000 and feel like I had a good chance. And then when I looked at like a kind of an all-in move of a more conservative nature, I didn't feel good enough about it, or that it would make me enough money to really put me in contention of moving. And so I wrapped up. I don't ever really do that in contests, but I just felt like I just didn't like the last race, and I wasn't going to risk 11 to win 20. I just didn't feel great about that. So
more than 20, 40.
Yeah, well, yes, because the what was the prize? 25. 25
in cash, and Pegasus. So 37, I guess is what. And so it's a good point that JK brings up. Technically speaking, if you're just talking about expected value in a vacuum, any horse he'd chosen to bet that he felt like was going to get his bankroll to, like, what would you have thought? What was your assumption of the winning number going?
Like 21 or 22. I had no idea it was going to be 32.
Yeah, it ended up being way higher than that.
Seventh place was 17, and the leader going into the race was at 18. So first place was at 18 going into the last, and then the 7th place person. The reason the 7th place was significant that was the last spot that got like an NHC seat or a seat, whatever. And so they it was definitely tricky ending to that thing.
Yeah, the equation's very complicated, because it's like you got to pick your number you're going to think. You got to be right about that number. But most of all, you just got to be happy with a bet. Just because a bet is expected value doesn't mean it's a good bet or the right bet to make for that situation. Or sometimes you have to look at the broader picture. And I think you're probably looking at well, how am I going to feel if I spend this 10 on a horse that is theoretically valued, but isn't a horse that I really like? You're not afraid to bet 10 grand, but you want to bet 10 grand in a race and a situation where you're excited about betting the horse. Yes.
Yeah, no, if it had been like the race before, the race where Tough Sunday won, like I had an opinion there that had some value to it, and I think that I would have risked the money to try to win. I didn't like Masochistic as much as I've loved Masochistic in the history of this world. One of the reasons I've loved him so much is because he always has unbelievable workouts in the workout report. He's always got A minuses and B pluses. And I remember Andy Harrington saying, like, this might be the best workhorse I've ever seen. And then this weekend, look at the workout report, and it's in both versions of it, the DRF one and Andy Harrington, it was negative. They it wasn't C's, but it was like, probably not as good as he usually is. And he ran to that, and so so I had some value there. I would have done it, but just not the race that was given.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. Any regrets?
No. I mean, even the last bet I made didn't cost me anything because I was $7,000 behind seventh. I would have, if I would have gone all in and like exact the Dutch the last race, I would have hit it. But all it would have done, I would have risked. I still feel fine with not risking the 11 to pick up another 10 to then get seventh in an NHCC. Like I'll get an NHCC later, right? Or I'll it's just not. I just didn't. I feel good about it. I don't regret that I didn't jump. Although Ryan Flanders was like furious at me, but
what did he say?
They called me every name in the book. He's like following me around in Logan, just giving me the business. So
that's just because you laid up.
Yeah. Then I had to remind him. At one point I said, "Hey, did you know that I won the Tour one year?" But the reason that's funny is because
he was second, wasn't he?
Is because he was second.
Yeah. So I got it right away.
And then he left me alone for a little while.
Yeah, that's a mic drop. JK's mic drop moment there in the Logan with our man Ryan. That's pretty funny. Horse players are great, aren't they? The winner, we should give the winner props. Jim Bennis, a former NHC champion, gets it done. Tony Joe runs second. Tony is developing a habit here of running second in these big live bankroll contests. He's certainly going to have a win soon. Before the year is out, I'm going to predict. And then Jim Meeks, a former Horseplayer World Series winner, third. So, when we talk, we're not meaning to speak ill of the people who take advantage of the quirks of the format and get to the top in the last race. They're obviously excellent horse players playing it the right way. But the idea is what other ways can we come up with to bring a little bit of balance back into power of the equivalent of the first 40 or 58 minutes of the game, as opposed to having it be all about the last two. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's what you want it to be, and that's what I'm excited about the World Horse Players Tour. I think it's going to be different, and it's going to. We were talking about it, like I said, last night, and understanding that the making the final 8, although yes, people will be firing to make the final 8, they will not be firing with as much enthusiasm to reach the leader at 32,000, but rather to reach 4th or 5th place at 17,000, so that they can then make it to the final table and have a shot. So I think it's going to be a little bit different and different in a good way.
Once again, that money at the final table will convert to mythical, just like the money in a poker tournament. There'll be blinds, essentially, at the final table, escalating minimums to force the action. The gameplay was really fun on Friday. I think it's going to be really fun March 19th. May, you got me doing it! May 19th and 20th out at Santa Anita for the Preakness. And who knows, maybe we should try to come up with some sort of podcast version of a final table at some point to do a little bit of a demonstration. Maybe we could do the production meeting in the middle of the show, or we could just talk offline about how that might work. I know we're already running over today, so much to talk about.
Yeah, let's figure out a date. We'll chat about it and come up with something. But I think it's a good idea.
Part of me would want to just like see if we could make Paul and Duke come on and do it. Part of me thinks we should open it up to listeners, run it that way. Part of me thinks it should be a blend of the two. We'll figure out something cool and make that happen. Tomorrow, if the snow doesn't come too hard, I will be on a plane. Actually, as many of you are listening to this, I will be on a plane to Cheltenham if everything is going well. Really a plane to London and then taking a taxi to Cheltenham. But Cheltenham Festival this week, not going to talk too much about it on here. I'll remind folks again, if you're looking for all the best information, my friends, Final Furlong podcast, they have individual shows for each day of the festival with tips. They are the best. They are hilarious. It'll take you a little bit of getting used to some of the different Irish racing terminology, English racing terminology, as well as pretty soon being able to pick up on the inside jokes, knowing who the Codfather is, etc. But I recommend doing the work to getting up and running on the Final Furlong podcast. It's going to be great. Cheltenham info on there. Steve Anderson will be posting tons of great stuff too about Cheltenham on the DRF site via DRF Live. Who knows? I may send a thought or two. We'll see how things go. We'll see if I even get there when I'm supposed to. Looking forward to a week sleeping on Dan Hardcore's couch if I can make the flight. Quick final thought from you, JK.
No, that's it. Always, as usual, the hospitality at Santa Anita is great. They treat us really well. So thanks to Nate Newby and Tom Quigley. Can't wait to get back out here.
They're fantastic. And yeah, that Preakness contest, take a look. Feeders and qualifiers, tournaments.drf.com. Win your way out there. It is going to be a ton of fun. Hey, who won the first seat? Did you notice who won the first seat to the WHT?
So I saw it with Sean Turner. Are we sure it's California Sean Turner, not the other one?
It is Elbow Racing Sean Turner as opposed to Maryland Sean Turner. So that'll be cool. He's a skilled live bankroll player, somebody I've been trying to interview for years, and it just hasn't worked out. Maybe this will be the excuse to get him. Of course, so many people to talk about, especially the nurse from New York who gave me props in the winning interview. That's she's high on the. You'll probably be hearing her voice on this show sooner rather than later. Okay, that's all the time we have. I want to thank Jonathan Kinchin, Travis Stone for his voiceover work, Willie Nile for the theme song "Dear Lord" from his self-titled first record. For more of his music, check out willienile.com. I want to thank producer Craig for bending over backwards to make this one happen and all the edits he's doing in post. We will be back. I don't know when we'll be back. Let's see what the setup looks like in Cheltenham. God willing and the creek don't rise, we'll be back later this week. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatal. May you win all your photos.